In early January 2026, a deadly encounter between a federal immigration officer and a civilian in Minneapolis ignited a national firestorm, raising urgent questions about the use of lethal force, the limits of federal authority, and the dangerous power of political language.
This domestic act of terrorism.
The incident occurred during a large-scale immigration and customs enforcement operation that flooded parts of the city with armed federal agents as part of a broader immigration crackdown. According to federal officials, the operation was designed to detain individuals suspected of immigration violations, but to many residents it felt like a militarized occupation. Streets were filled with unmarked vehicles, agents wearing tactical gear, and checkpoints that appeared without warning. It was in this tense environment that 37-year-old Renee Nicole Good was shot and killed by an ICE agent. An event that would quickly escalate from a local tragedy into a national controversy. On the morning of January 7th, Renee Nicole Good was driving through Minneapolis after dropping her young child off at school. Federal authorities say ICE agents attempted to stop her vehicle near an active enforcement zone. According to the Department of Homeland Security, Good failed to comply with verbal commands and used her vehicle in a manner that posed a threat to an officer on the scene. An ICE agent fired his weapon, killing her almost instantly. Within hours, federal officials released statements asserting that the agent acted in self-defense.
And when they demanded and commanded her to get out of her vehicle several times, she did not.
What stunned the public, however, was not only the speed with which the killing was justified, but the language used to describe the woman who had died.
This was an act of domestic terrorism.
A label that immediately drew backlash from legal experts, civil rights advocates,
what we see on that camera is murder that is being justified,
and local leaders. As the story spread, attention turned to who Renee Nicole Good actually was. Friends, family members, and neighbors described her as a mother of three, a creative individual, and someone deeply connected to her community. She had no known history of violent crime, no ties to extremist organizations, and no record of political militancy. She was not a protest leader or an activist known to law enforcement. To many Americans, the idea that a civilian with no criminal charges could be posthumously labeled a terrorist felt deeply disturbing. Critics argued that the term was being used not as a legal classification, but as a rhetorical shield to protect federal actions from scrutiny. Public doubts intensified when video footage of the incident began circulating online. Body camera recordings and bystander videos showed fragments of the encounter, but they did not clearly support the claim that Good intentionally tried to run over an officer. The footage showed her vehicle reversing and turning, but the exact sequence of events leading up to the gunfire remained unclear. The lack of a definitive visual narrative fueled skepticism and anger, especially among those who felt that lethal force should be a last resort. Many asked why non-lethal measures were not used, and whether the presence of heavily armed federal agents escalated a situation that could have ended without loss of life. The controversy surrounding the term domestic terrorist quickly became one of the most explosive aspects of the case. Under United States law, there is no formal process that allows the government to designate individual citizens as domestic terrorists in the same way it designates foreign terrorist organizations. Domestic terrorism is defined in federal statutes, but it is applied through criminal charges, investigations, and prosecutions, not through public declarations by executive officials. Legal scholars warn that using the term without due process undermines its legal meaning and risks turning it into a political weapon rather than a judicial category. They argued that labeling a deceased civilian a terrorist without charges or trial sets a dangerous precedent that erodes constitutional protections. Local officials in Minneapolis pushed back forcefully against the federal narrative.
ICE officials, they don't know how to obey the law in any way or fashion.
City leaders stated that the evidence released so far did not support the claim that the shooting was clearly justified. The mayor publicly rejected the domestic terrorist label, calling it unfounded and inflammatory.
Get the fuck out of Minneapolis. We do not want you here. Now, somebody is dead. That's on you.
State officials demanded transparency and called for an independent investigation, arguing that federal agencies should not be allowed to investigate themselves in cases involving lethal force. Tensions escalated further when the FBI took over the investigation, sidelining local authorities and deepening concerns about impartiality and accountability. As outrage grew, protests erupted across Minneapolis and rapidly spread to other cities across the United States. Demonstrators gathered outside federal buildings holding signs, chanting slogans and demanding justice for Renee Nicole Good. For many protesters, the killing symbolized a broader pattern of aggressive federal enforcement, militarized policing, and lack of accountability. Some demonstrations remained peaceful, while others saw clashes between protesters and law enforcement, further amplifying national tensions. The case became a rallying point for critics of ICE and for those who believe immigration enforcement has grown dangerously disconnected from community safety and human rights. The federal government, meanwhile, doubled down on its position. Officials reiterated their support for the ICE agent involved.
That guy's protected by absolute immunity. He was doing his job.
And defended the use of the term domestic terrorist, arguing that actions perceived as threatening federal officers could fall under that definition.
This was an act of domestic terrorism. This vehicle was used to hit this officer. It was used as a weapon, and the officer feels as though his life was in jeopardy.
This stance only deepened the divide between federal authorities and local leaders, as well as between supporters of strict immigration enforcement and civil liberties advocates. Critics accused the administration of attempting to control the narrative by using emotionally charged language.
I felt horribly when I was told that the young woman...
to justify lethal force before all the facts were known. As the investigation continued, attention turned to the legal realities surrounding federal law enforcement accountability. Prosecuting federal officers for on-duty shootings is notoriously difficult. Legal doctrines such as qualified immunity, combined with broad discretion granted to officers who claim they perceived a threat, make criminal charges exceedingly rare. As weeks passed, no charges were filed against the ICE agent involved in the shooting. For many Americans, this reinforced a growing belief that federal agents operate with near-total immunity, especially in high-profile enforcement operations. Beyond the immediate legal questions, the killing of Renee Nicole Good sparked a wider national conversation about language, power, and justice. Civil rights organizations warned that casually labeling civilians as terrorists risks normalizing extreme responses and stripping individuals of their humanity. They argued that such language makes it easier to justify violence and harder to demand accountability. Supporters of federal enforcement countered that officers face dangerous, unpredictable situations and must be trusted to protect themselves. The debate revealed deep fractures in how Americans view law enforcement, security, and the balance between safety and rights. The case also reignited long-standing concerns about the role of federal agencies in local communities. Critics argued that large-scale immigration operations often rely on overwhelming force, increasing the likelihood of tragic outcomes. They questioned whether federal priorities are being imposed on cities without regard for local conditions or public consent. Supporters of ICE maintained that enforcing federal law requires decisive action and that resistance, even perceived resistance, can have deadly consequences. As of now, the story remains unresolved. Investigations continue, protests persist, and legal experts warn that meaningful accountability may never come. What is certain is that a woman is dead, a family has been shattered, and trust between communities and federal authorities has been further eroded. The killing of Renee Nicole Good has become more than a single incident. It has become a symbol of a system under strain, where power, fear, and language collide with devastating consequences. Whether this case leads to reform, reflection, or further division remains to be seen, but its impact on the national conversation about law enforcement and civil liberties is already undeniable. If stories like this matter to you, don't let them disappear in the noise. Subscribe to this channel for in-depth reporting that goes beyond headlines and official statements. Share this video so more people can see the full context, not just the sound bites. Leave a comment with your thoughts. Was this justified use of force or a dangerous misuse of power? Your voice matters, especially as investigations continue and accountability is debated. Stay informed, stay critical, and stay engaged, because understanding these moments is the first step toward real change.